Springfield's Morning News, I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Wanted to get out a fresh segment for you on the YMCA issue of a transgender individual being in a girl's locker room and minor girls being uncomfortable by that. It's raised national attention, gotten on Fox News, and even Riley Gaines speaking out against this as well. Thursday, news conference at Rotary Park in Springfield across from the YMCA facility there, and you had a host of individuals hosted by the Illinois Freedom Caucus. They're taking an interest in this case as they push for what they say is safety for girls in women's sports and women's locker rooms. But the 16-year-old at the center of this, Abigail Wheeler, she was there and she shared her thoughts.
Good afternoon. My name is Abigail Wheeler and I am 16 years old. After seeing the man in the women's locker room, I was scared and upset. I decided to leave immediately because I was alone with them and felt very uncomfortable. I went to my coach, Alex Tatura, and told him that there is a man in the women's locker room. He responded that he was aware of it and there was nothing he could do. That is when I realized this was not my first time seeing this man in the women's locker room. About roughly 4 months earlier, I was again in the locker room changing with a group of girls out of our swimsuits. When I looked across the locker room, I saw what I thought was a very manly-looking woman sitting on a chair in the corner wearing a women's swimsuit. Even though it seemed suspicious, I didn't say anything and kept myself wrapped in my towel while changing. When I asked my coach how long they knew that biological men were changing in the women's locker room, I was laughed at and told that, I quote, "Transgenders have been around a long time." I replied, "That is not what I asked," and restated the question to them. Finally, the CEO responded that the YMCA had been aware for a while. I was also told that if I wasn't comfortable changing in the women's locker room, that I could use the family changing areas or not use the facilities at all. Shortly after being told this, my teammate and I, Lucy, decided to make informative signs to let people know that biological men were changing in the women's locker room while parents and families were completely unaware and young girls were present. The next day at practice, my head coach, Alex, and the YMCA branch director, Kenzie Primus, pulled the girls' team aside, telling us that hateful messages were hung in the women's locker room. They said that these signs were considered hate speech, discriminatory, and disrespectful. After talking with us, my teammate and I went to our coach and told him that we were gladly a part of this. I explained to him that the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, and I was raised in a Christian home. I know what the Christian values are, and the YMCA was not upholding the Christian values like they say they are. He responded to me by saying that it would no longer be appropriate for us to practice with the team, and the YMCA would be in contact with our families, and we were sent home. In that moment, I knew that my efforts in bringing awareness to the fact that biological men were using the women's changing spaces in the YMCA.
We love you, Abby!
Weren't going to be enough. I did all the right things. I saw something that was obviously wrong, and I told my coach, someone who I am supposed to trust, someone who I am supposed to be able to come to when I feel unsafe or scared. Instead, all of my feelings of unsafety, fear, and vulnerability were simply brushed aside. I was made to feel as though I was in the wrong. I was made to feel as though there was something wrong with me feeling uncomfortable changing in the women's locker room, where biological men were being allowed to undress in the same space as me and my underage teammates. Not only were my feelings discredited, but I was also removed from my swim team and banned from the YMCA. I am here in hopes that sharing my story will reach parents, future parents, coaches, churches, and members of the YMCA.
Abigail's father, Dan Wheeler, was also there. He shared his thoughts, but took questions afterwards, and in particular, he addressed the question of the YMCA saying that Abigail wasn't suspended or kicked off the team, and that the family actually withdrew Abigail and their membership from the Y. Mr. Wheeler didn't dispute that.
You said on national news, you said it here today, several others saying that Abigail was banned from the YMCA. Can you clarify that? My understanding is that she withdrew on her own because of what happened, and you also stated this today that you withdrew your membership from the Y. Can you clarify that? Was Abigail indeed banned?
Absolutely. It's a great question. It's one that the Y chooses to stand firm, and their response is that they did not kick Abigail off the team. But the fact of the matter is they made it impossible for her to continue with the team. And what I mean by that is they found out about the signs. They approached her. They approached the girls' team. Abigail and her teammate Lucy went straight up to the coach afterwards and said, "We were part of this. This was something we did because we got no resolution on this matter when I approached you the last 3 times." So they hung signs up. They wanted to share their mind. They wanted to share what they were feeling because they weren't being received by the coach or the Y administration. So they kicked out of practice that night. They were told they couldn't come back to the practice, and they were told they couldn't come into the Y until they had a meeting with her. Okay, I'm a trained USA official. I called USA Swimming Safe Sport. They were very interested in our story. They wanted to attend the meeting. I called Kinsey Primus back the next day. I said, "We're going to take your meeting so Abigail can continue with the team. But I have 2 members I'd like to have come to this meeting." She said, "Sure, well, who are they?" I told Executive Director of USA Swimming Safe Sport and a manager. She said, "Okay." The next day I get an email from Jill Steiner. Said, "Heard you want to bring Safe Sport people to the meeting." I'm the Safe Sport person for the Y. Jill Steiner is the Safe Sport person for this Y. She said, "Don't need those people. I'm the person." I emailed her back. I said, "I don't understand. I'm confused. I have the email right here. I could read it to you, but I said, I'm confused. Why won't you allow us to be represented in this meeting?" And her response was, and I concluded that email, I said, at a minimum, the Y ought to have a meeting with the 2 affected families, my family and Lucy's family. Email immediately back from Jill Steiner said, "Nope, meetings with Abigail." At that point, Dad understood exactly what the motive or the path forward here was. To pass judgment and punishment on my daughter. And Dad stood up and said, "You know what? My daughter's been punished enough." And I didn't accept the meeting, and by default, we had to leave the Y, and she had to quit the team. So that's how that happened.
With this whole interaction, was there at any point where the person that was in the locker room was in any way threatening you directly or?
Let me answer it. I think it's. I wanted you to know our family's position. It's not whether a biological male is naked, whether a biological male is leering, whether a biological male has a camera out. It's the fact that there's a biological male in the girls' locker room.
Coming back, I'll share with you a one-on-one conversation I had with Christina Newton, a transgender individual who says that they believe they're the ones that were actually in the locker room and maybe the ones that made Abigail feel uncomfortable. Asked Christina about the situation, how they felt after hearing Abigail's concerns, and whether Abigail's concerns would mean that Newton would use a different restroom. We'll get to that coming up next. Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, and wanted to get a fresh update for you. The YMCA, the transgender locker room issue, news conference yesterday. We heard from Abigail Wheeler. We heard from Dan Wheeler, Abigail's father. But afterwards, there were several individuals in attendance, one being Christina Newton, who was in the crowd. Afterwards, I talked with Christina, who identifies as trans, as a woman, and Christina shared with me their thoughts on what they heard, and also that they believe that they're one of the individuals at the center of this.
No trans has ever shown themselves in a woman's locker room at all. We don't even, when we go in there, we don't even do it. We go in the bathroom stall and change. That way no one sees us changing. So that story was fabricated because we don't do it. To be it's racist because we are females. And that's bottom line. Because when you get in the medical part, we are females. We may not show on outside, but mentally we are. So, yeah. We have not had no issues except one person here. And me and Candace was just talking, and she stuck her head around the corner. And that's when me and her was fully dressed, and she had stuck her head around the corner. And that's when we was just talking. We was both in our swimsuits, about ready to head to the pool, and we was just talking about my surgeries. That's it. We wasn't showing people our private stuff.
The Y says that Abigail could just go into the family room. Has anybody gave you that instruction?
No, the Y totally respects us for who we are, and no issue from day one with me on it.
Knowing it makes her and others uncomfortable, is that something you would consider?
No, I don't, because we are females, bottom line. There's no biological or nothing to divide it. We are females, and that's how we are.
Anything else you want to add?
That we're all human beings, no matter who we are, what color we are, what sex we are. All the trans female and people is trying to do is survive and exist and to fit in. We're not harming nobody else. No one wants to take time to understand us at all. It's easier to judge than try to understand us. I always been open book, and that's how it's going to be. I explain. Somebody asks me a question, I explain. That's the only way you're going to teach people about us is telling them about us the proper way and the correct information.
Well, that's a little overview. We'll talk a lot more about this on Monday with some of your phone calls as well. But just wanted to get out an update for you on the latest in the YMCA transgender locker room issue that's made national headlines. And you're hearing it here on WMAY. I'm Greg Bishop with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.